Florida has the best land trust in the entire country, okay? Because land trusts are a thing in a lot of states, but none of them except Florida has protection against liability in the same way that an LLC does. People buy investment property in their personal name, and that is, I'm sorry, that is dumb. I mean, there's no reason to do that. You're not really successful until you get sued, right? It's that preventative, legal counsel, right?
Welcome to REsimpli podcast. This is Sharad, host of the REsimpli podcast, bringing you a very special guest, Bishoy Habib, for you. Bishoy, welcome to REsimpli podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you, Sharad. I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live, and how are you related to this crazy world of real estate?
So if you can see the jersey back there, that's a Tampa Bay Bucks Mike Evans. I'm based in Tampa Bay, Florida. I've been here in Florida most of my career. I spent 2 years in New York as well, my first 2 years out of law school. So I got licensed up there, but I call Florida home and I practice all over the state. How did I started in real estate? I like to think I was kind of born into it. So my dad had been investing in real estate before I was born, and as an immigrant, Egyptian immigrant, I only had really three options. I could be a pharmacist, a dentist, or a doctor. And I chose neither. I hated science. I hated it completely. So I decided to do business. And um, so even I remember when I was younger, I'd drive around the properties with him. I mean, he'd drive us around, and I negotiated my first commercial lease when I was 15. Obviously,
Amazing.
but he was negotiating it, but I was helping, and we were redlining. And this was back when you had to fax it back and forth to people, to the other side. So that was pretty cool. And then I just kind of figured this is what I wanted to do. And I went to law school, figured I'd take every real estate class that they offered. I did that. I thought I'd get some cool job offer when I finished school, but that was during the financial crisis of '09. I graduated in '09. So I was like, well, let me go get a law degree. It can't hurt. So I went to law school, got my law degree. The market was still kind of tough in 2012. I was like, well, I'll just practice real estate law. And then one day you look up and it's been, years, and you're getting good at it. You're adding value to clients. You have leveraged, your position to, toward relationships and kind of being in good spots just by being an attorney. And so then you're like, well, this is actually kind of fun, right? Once you start getting the hang of it. So I'm in year 12 right now, as a real estate attorney. But it's always what I've wanted to do, the real estate side of
Yeah,
things.
amazing. Yeah, congratulations on all the success. So you started in New York for a couple of years and then you decided to move down to Florida. Any reason? Do you have family in Florida or just no
Yeah.
state income tax?
Both.
Yeah.
I grew up in Orlando, and that's why you see the
Oh,
Orlando Magic jersey over there. And so I left the state at a time when I just wanted something different. Back when I left 10 plus years ago, we didn't have the growth and opportunities that we necessarily do now in Central Florida. Obviously, the last 10 years has been a crazy boom, and especially since COVID. But back then it was a little bit more difficult and there was less opportunities. In New York, on the other hand, was on the up and up, when it was still hot and the best place to live and had the best developments. And so I had a very unique opportunity to work with one of the biggest hotel developers in Manhattan history. And I cut my teeth for 2 years in New York. I learned how to work hard. I didn't know how to work hard before I got up there, and I thought, 40 hours a week was doing it. And then you get up there and you learn what a real work ethic is.
yeah.
And so that was an amazing opportunity for me. And then what brought me back down here was, you said it exactly: family, no income tax, quality of life, cost of living, all the same things that brought
Right.
people down during COVID. But I was,
Right.
5, 6 years ahead of them.
Right. So did you start your own practice like right away, or were you working for another, with another attorney and then eventually got on your own?
Yeah, so I was working with another attorney up there. I came down here. I honed my skills for quite some time. And then when I realized that I had a lot more to offer than just working with a firm, I took all of my experiences together and I found, what is it that's most important to the client? And it came down to three things. It's being responsive as an attorney, It's being investor friendly in my world, business friendly, investor friendly, and it means being trustworthy. And those are the three core components that I found in my law firm with Legacy Legal, where we help clients leave a legacy. And I figured as long as I had those three components every day and every decision was based around them, that I would be successful, because that's really what the client pain points are and why clients are afraid of attorneys, why they
Hmm.
don't like attorneys.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You don't really appreciate an attorney until you actually need one. And then you're like, oh my God, you're the best person in the world for me right now.
It's like a
So,
doctor.
right, exactly. Yeah. So, but do you primarily work with real estate attorneys? Is that your primary client base?
Real estate investors.
Yes. Is that primarily who you work with?
That's who, yeah. So I work with, so I practice like real estate law and business transactions as well.
Okay.
As I mentioned, I mean, real estate's kind of where my bread and butter, but I've also done finance law. I work with a ton of lenders. I love working with lenders. Could be a bank, could be a credit union, could be a private lender, hard money lender, doesn't matter. And investors, right?
Right.
So I got investors who are buying their first flip and they want to know how to structure it. And I have investors who are hedge funds and family offices that, have $1 billion under assets. So it really runs the gamut. But I just love piecing deals together. I
Right.
love the business aspect of it. I love the deal aspect of it. And unlike most attorneys, I'm not scared of numbers. Most attorneys hate numbers. I like
Yeah.
numbers, I like math.
That's
So
awesome. All
yeah.
right. So the one of the most common questions investors ask is, what's the best entity structure? Right? Your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are I'm in a unique position because I live in Florida and I practice in Florida. And Florida has the best land trust in the entire country. Okay. Because land trusts are a thing in a lot of states, but none of them except Florida has protection against liability in the same way that an LLC does. So it's not one size fits all. It never is. And there's always other answers. It's nuanced, because the number one thing we as attorneys love to say is it depends. But I would say that the go-to is a land trust. And now there's other factors. Are you paying cash? Are you getting a loan? Are you going to transfer the property? You're holding it as a rental, or is it a flip? So there's other factors. But if we can put it in a land trust in Florida, that's my favorite way to hold a property.
So you would have each property in its own land trust,
That's right.
right?
That's
Who
right.
would be who would be the beneficiary and trustee of the trust?
Yeah. So, and let me back up, because if you're a little newer, you may not understand the concept of the land trust. So I'll give you the main benefits of a land trust. Number one, it's completely private or anonymous, and that's huge. Um, because not only does that, keep your name off the record, so nobody knows, who you are, they can't track you down, but more importantly than that, there's a lot of frivolous lawsuit. Actually, here in Florida, we are the number one state for frivolous lawsuits in the entire U.S. And number two, in total lawsuits, excuse me. And number two is New York,
I'm
and we have
surprised it's
twice as
not
many.
California or New York.
Yes, you're exactly, because they're bigger states than us. Number two is New York, and they have half as many lawsuits as us in 2023. There's a lot of insurance laws that are changing right now. There's a lot of legislation that's happened because there's a lot of these lawsuits have to do with the insurance laws that were in place before. So some of that's going to ramp down. But the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of litigation out there, and a lot of it's frivolous. And so people say to me all the time, well, Bishoy, why do I want to be anonymous? I'm not hiding anything. The answer is, if you get in a car accident, whether it's your fault or not, and somebody hires an attorney and they look you up, and they see that you own 20 rental properties, whether you're at fault or not, whether you actually did anything, you know very well that that attorney is going to at least start a claim against you and hope that you settle for something. If that attorney, on the other hand, looks you up and they do an asset search and they see that you don't own anything on paper, or they can't track you back to anything, they're not going to waste their time, because that attorney only gets paid typically on a contingency, or that client wouldn't, pay legal fees for
Right.
someone that's not collectible. So the first thing is being invisible. That's the first part of it. Number two in Florida is the limited liability that I just mentioned. And then the third aspect of it is the estate planning side. So if we put it in a land trust and you die, you don't have to go through probate. You just decide in the land trust who gets the property, and they automatically get it when you die. So when we talk about a land trust, those are the three big benefits of the land trust. Now, you asked a very good question, which is what are the ideal structure? Again, it's not a one size fits all approach, but what we do is we create different layers, right? So we want to insulate you as much as possible. And I'm not here to give legal advice, obviously, but in general, we want to create as many barriers to liability as possible. And so there's no bulletproof. I don't use the word bulletproof except to say there's no bulletproof way to shield your assets, because if you did something wrong and the other party has enough money, they can find you and they can sue you. But at the end of the day, we try to mitigate that risk as much as possible. And the way we do that is through different layers and barriers that we create.
Right. I live in California. I buy my properties in Indiana. I own several rentals and I do flips. So the way I have it set up is each of the rental properties that I have and flips that I have are in its own individual land trust. So if I buy 123 Main Street, we would just name it 123 Main Street Land Trust. And then I'm the trustee, and then the beneficiary is my LLC. I have two separate LLCs, one for my flips and one for my rental properties. And then I use just the main bank account for each of the LLCs for operations purposes. And my reason for setting up that way was exactly the same, to be anonymous and have estate planning. And just if you go to state of Indiana, you search my name, nothing comes up. Or if you search for 123 Main Street, it doesn't show anything else. It's not related to any other asset.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. Is that what you most commonly notice, that people would set up the beneficiary as the LLC and they will be the trustee on the document?
So you're half right and half wrong, and in my opinion, what I like to do. And so the half that you're right is having an LLC own it. And I think that aspect of it is even more important in other states. The reason it's not as important in Florida is because there's no personal liability in a land trust. And we're the only state in the entire country like that, where as long as you don't do anything malicious, or fraudulent, then you can be protected from personal liability as a beneficiary. So I do set them up like that all the time. It's more important in a state like Indiana than it is in Florida. The part that I would change in what you're saying is I wouldn't name you as a trustee, because at least in Florida, the name of the trustee is on the public record. So the way the deed reads and the way the public record search is, let's say I was a trustee of the Main Street Trust, it would say this property vests in Bishoy Habib as trustee of the 123 Main Street Trust. So if you and this is a common mistake people do with land trust, they do this all the time. If you put yourself as a trustee, at least in Florida, your name is on the title. Now, your name is on title as trustee, but people can draw conclusions pretty easily that way, and you're traceable. You're associated with that. Now, if it's an attorney or an accountant or a company that's trustee, people may get confused, but I'm an attorney. So if I'm trustee, I can be trustee for anyone as their attorney. So we got different things that we do. I don't put my name on. I'm not the trustee, by the way, of my own client's trust. I don't want to be on title to anyone's property. I have a separate way of doing that keeps me away and keeps me insulated, because what I found was people then would start contacting me because they knew, well, I'm the attorney, so I must know something. So I've created an even bigger separation so that it's completely untraceable to anyone. And that's really the optimal setup for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah, at least in state of Indiana, the trustee name doesn't show up on the deed. So
interesting.
If you search, it just literally says 123 Main Street Land Trust. So when we buy and sell, when I actually sell the property, I make my property manager, who's based in Indiana, the trustee, so she can just go and sign. It's like when I buy, I'm the trustee. When I sell, I make her the trustee. But you said you've done some other things. What are some of the things you've done to just have an extra layer or two of protection?
Yeah, it's shell companies, it's holding companies, it's trusts within trusts. I mean, we get as creative as we need to get, and the more assets you have, the more complex it becomes. Absolutely.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people have made with how their legal entities set up, or just with other legal things in their business when they come to you?
The
Like just
number
like
one,
total newbie mistakes.
the number one thing I see is very simple. It's exactly what we're talking about. People buy investment property in their own name and in their own personal name. And that is, I'm sorry, that is dumb. I mean, there's no reason to do that. There's no upside to doing that. You're just, imagine if you just put your bank account on the public record, because you might as well be doing that at that point to show everyone what you have, what you're worth, who should go after you. And here's the thing about it. I've never talked to someone who doesn't know the rule. Everyone knows it's a bad idea. People just do it anyway because it's convenient. You know, a lot of times it might have to do with the financing of the property or the fact that they just never got around to forming an LLC. It's a terrible idea. And by the way, a lot of sophisticated investors still do it. I don't know why. I don't understand why. They just don't want, they're like, oh, I've had it like this for years and nothing's ever happened. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's your decision. I'm not in California. California is even crazier because you could be 1% liable and be liable for 100% of the damages. So I've heard of a situation where there was like a father son and the father owned 1% of a club, a nightclub, and somebody I think the valet was drunk and he drove and paralyzed someone, and they got sued for like $10 million,
Oh,
and the
wow.
dad had to pay the entire judgment because the son wasn't collectible, and the dad was literally just a 1% owner. And he had to pay the whole thing. It's a travesty, you know. So that's a very simple one. The business side of it's the same thing. I mean, you just have to set up, because the problem that I see is a lot of people get started and they're not thinking about how it looks 2 or 3 or 4 steps from then. They're just excited to get started and make some money. And that's fine. Like, nobody does tax planning before they start making money. You start thinking about taxes as you start making money. It's the same thing with liability. So it's just thinking ahead. And if you haven't been sued yet, that's a great thing, but do not wait till you get sued to figure it out, because by then it's
Right.
too late a lot of times.
So what are some of the things an investor can do just to be, proactive to, when it comes to their legal issues? I mean, I feel like if you've been in the business long enough, you will get sued for something, like if you own rental properties, your tenant's going to sue you. If you're in a business, if you're in a partnership, you might have some disagreement with your partner, you get sued. So what are some of the things, we can do as investors to protect ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, they say you're not really successful until you get sued, right?
Right.
So, it's that preventative, legal counsel, right? So we all know the concept of preventative medicine. If I eat healthy and I exercise every day and I do my regular doctor visits, my likelihood of getting sick down the line is so much smaller, right? And that's why insurance companies are so focused on preventative medicine now, and they're willing to spend big money on it because it saves them so much money on the back end. It's the same concept in the legal world. The little preventative measures that you take today will save you tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars if you do them right. So what I would encourage listeners to do is really get in touch with your real estate attorney, or if you don't have one, if you plan to be in the space, get a good one. Having a good attorney is not just when I get sued, I need an attorney. That's the last, that should be the end point of that relationship, meaning like that's the last part of it. There are so many steps beforehand. And the conversations that I have with my clients range from all kinds of things. Obviously, could you draft this contract for me? Could you review this contract? But then it's a lot of strategy. It's a lot of strategic things, right? How should we approach this? Should we approach it from an angle of being aggressive with them? Should you write a demand letter, Bishoy, or should we do X, Y, and Z? And then I kind of think through the options and who has the leverage and what's the situation and do I know their attorney? And there's 100 different aspects of, a decision, a business decision, or there could be if it's complicated. And I think that we have a vital role in that and kind of guiding people. The earlier we get involved as real estate attorneys, or really attorneys in general, in the process, the better that is for you. And trust me, I know a lot of people flinch and say, we don't want to pay attorneys fees up front, but the attorney's fees you pay up front is fractional compared to what you would pay on the back end. Whether that's reviewing a contract and making sure that there's an attorney's fee provision in there, right? This is something I did a talk on recently. Was, someone said, what's a clause that we should always be aware of? In Florida, an attorney's fee provision, right? And just an example, if you don't have that in there and it's a contract you signed with another party, whatever the contract is, and they default or they breach and you have to sue them, you may not be entitled to recover your legal fees, even if you were right and even if you win the lawsuit. But if you have that language in there that says any prevailing party shall be entitled to recover legal fees, now all of a sudden think about the disincentive of the other party to breach that contract. Think about how much less likely they are knowing, okay, not only do I have to pay the damages, but now I have to pay their legal fees. So the longer this
Right.
drags out, the more I'm going to have to pay. So it's just little things like that that you would never know as, you know, as a layperson, a non-attorney, but it, you know, it could be one sentence, two sentences, and it could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in the grand scheme of things. And so I think we have to change the framework of how we view attorneys as kind of preventative versus when things go bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you another, like, it's similar context. I'm in the process of, I used to live in Canada until mid last year. So I moved to US last year. And then I'm working with a new accountant. And it's such a different experience working with this accountant, to your point. He's helping me be more proactive with my taxes and not say, hey, just Sharad, send me your financials at the end of the year and I'll file your tax. And he's saying, okay, let's just look at what you can do right now. So you have a low tax liability at the end of the year, which is a totally different experience. Like whether it's come to, hey, let's just do this change with your entity structure, right? If you're using your card for business purposes, let's make sure you're documenting everything. And I can already see the value from that. And I look at it, the attorneys exactly the same way. I own a property management company in Indiana, and my property manager, she works with real estate attorney, absolutely amazing. And it makes her life so much easier having that relationship, that before like before you buy a property, before you do something new, it makes so much difference. Just run by the attorney, not just, I mean, the way I look at it, it's not just from a legal point of view. Of course, you get that value, but I feel like talking to someone like you, what's going to happen, Bishoy, is you have like, decades of experience, like working with so many different clients, that you're of course going to give me the best information when it comes to legal, but you're also going to give me information from a business point of view. Like, hey, this is another client that I have, who was similar situation, and this is what they did, and I can see how it worked out for them. So you might want to leverage that. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like people sometimes cheap out, not spending, getting the best attorney, getting the best accountant, and it ends up costing so much in the long term. Then you're like, man, if you just hired an attorney, a good attorney to begin with, you would be so far ahead in terms of how you set up your entities. And sometimes what happens is, like, you realize the importance of having a right attorney, after it's too late. You own all these properties individually, you don't have any estate planning, and let's say, God forbid, you pass away, and now it's such a burden for your family. I'm sure you see stuff like this all the time, where people are like, oh man, if you had just spent a couple of hours, ahead of time, and just we had planned everything correctly, then it would save you like months, if not years, of anguish down the road.
Probate is the perfect example for that, Sharad. I'm glad you brought that up. And I want to touch on one thing you said, and then I'll jump into this. But the network is the other thing, is people underestimate. It's like if you have a good attorney in your corner and someone who's been doing this for a while and someone who's established, especially locally, don't underestimate the amount of people that I could put you in touch with to do X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
So I agree with you on that point. I mean, let's talk about probate real quick. So people just it's all about education is what I've learned. So a lot of people just don't know what they don't know, and they never have been in a situation where they have to go through probate. For the listeners who don't know what probate is a very painful process that occurs typically when someone passes away. If they did not have a trust, even if they did have a will, or if they didn't have a will, but if they didn't have a trust or something else, there's other certain documents, but let's just call it a trust for now. If you did not have a trust, all your belongings have to go through the court system. It's called probate. It's open to the public. At least in Florida, could take up to a year and a half, 2 years, depending on your assets. People get the right to, siblings and family members get the right to fight over your stuff. And when you see that in movies and in the news with big families, that's what probate is. When all the heirs and the kids and the spouse, and everybody's fighting over the dead person's belongings. So probate is always a pretty bad experience for people. I mean, very few people come out saying that was a good experience for me. And you know what's funny? The only people when I talk to people about probate who know what probate is are the people who have been through it. And they're the only people that stop me when I give my little explanation. They go, no, no, I know what it is. Let's create the trust. I don't want to deal with that again. Because I have to explain, well, this is why you want to trust, right? Or one of the reasons. So it's one document that I could create for you, right? And we do estate planning. I have estate planners at my firm, very, very good estate planners who deal with very high net worth individuals. So we do that as well because it's a natural progression. I got the investors, they want to invest, they want to build their wealth, they want to create a legacy, and they want to keep all that, inside their family. So, when I try to explain this to people, I could create one document, or we could create one document, a living trust or a family trust, and that one document could save you, I'm not exaggerating, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and a year or 2 years of all your assets being tied up by the court system until the court decides, okay, that's fine. Your kids can get what you left for them. In a will, you could have a will. Say, I want my kids to have all my assets. And the court could still hold that for a year or 2 years and say, we have to make sure you don't owe anybody money. We have to make sure everybody else got accounted for. That's what happens. And that's what the trust prevents. And I mean, that's probably the most blatant, flagrant example of how simple one document, we could draft it in 2 weeks if you want, and it could
Right.
save so much time and money and effort.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just like the money part, which of course, it saves you that. But imagine like you don't want to put your family through this, right?
Yes.
They're already going through so much like emotional distress, and now they have to like go through fighting over the assets. Like you don't want to do that. Like if you set it up initially up ahead of time, I mean, it creates such a better experience for everyone. Like you have a peace of mind that okay, everything is in place, and then afterwards like your family doesn't have to worry about it, like they feel like they're protected. So other than investors not using the right entity structure, like what's the other thing that you notice, you look at it like, oh my god, I can't believe real estate investors do this?
I would say not, going into partnerships without documenting anything or trusting other parties. One guy's the money guy, one guy's, supposed
The
to be doing all
deals
the work.
guy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the deals guy or the flip guy or the contractor. And then, you know who always calls me is the money guy,
right.
right? Always,
Money
always
guy.
calls me and say, I wired him $100,000 and, he was supposed to have it done by this date and that didn't happen. And okay, cool. Where's the agreement? Well, he's a friend and blah, blah, blah. And okay. So it's not that we can't sue that guy. It's just that it makes it incredibly difficult and you're not as protected because even if you have a text message saying, yeah, let's do this, or, yeah, wire me the 100,000. Okay, that's fine. So we know you wired him the money, but what was he supposed to do? Where does it
Right.
say he was supposed to do these things? And where are the timelines? And how do we know that he actually defaulted? How do we know what he was actually supposed to do? And so all of these things, people come to me all the time with these problems and they don't have anything in writing. I know some of these things seem very simplistic and very, simple. I guess, like rookie mistakes, but I see them every day. I'm telling you what I
Right.
see.
Yeah. As you're talking, I bought an apartment complex with best friend of mine from college. We went to school in New York. Now we both live in Southern California. We bought an apartment complex in Indiana. And it's funny, we didn't write anything in writing. We just went to state of Indiana, set up an LLC. And now we bought it for cash. And now we're doing a cash out refinancing. And the lender is asking for an operating agreement. And I went to ChatGPT. I'm not proud to say this. Just print out. He's my best friend, so hopefully things will never go wrong. But I want to ask you about ChatGPT, right? I'm sure you get clients who come to you with some research they've done on ChatGPT. Like, how do you see that impacting real estate investors when it comes to like, protecting themselves legally? Or like, has that not had any impact with like in your practice?
No, it's had an impact. I think a lot of people, I think it's I'm diving headfirst into the AI space. I'm not a tech guy by nature, but I'm forcing myself to become one, and I use the tools every day. I read every day on updates. I hired an AI consultant in my law firm. I hired an AI consultant in my other real estate business. And we consult with him every week, and he's building us different, tools. So the AI conversation is very relevant to everybody, and especially those in like the service industry, like what I'm doing, an accountant, honestly, even doctors are on the cusp of, not being replaced, of course, but you can go and read about how, AI is detecting cancer at a much higher rate than humans, right? Because there's a much slimmer risk of error.
Hmm.
So we're not at the point right now as a legal field where where AI has like replaced us. The problem with AI right now is that it's not capable of drafting a 30 or 40 page document, right? It's too expensive. It doesn't make sense. And the day it does, I'll know about that. But it's definitely changing the world. As an attorney, I feel like we need to lean into it. I've had good experiences with it. I mean, I love it, but I've had experiences as well where it spits out garbage. You'll try to ask it a question. Everybody's, well, not everybody, but in the legal world, everybody's heard of this case in New York where one of the attorneys in a legitimate case asked ChatGPT. Now, this is when it was newer, like a year and a half ago, asked ChatGPT about a case, and it recited, like, I don't know what he prompted it, but it came out with like a whole brief, and he submitted it to the court. He didn't review it. He didn't cross-reference it. All of the reference cases in there were fake. It was all made up. Was
Oh,
not, none
wow.
of them were real. The judge, of course, looked up the cases. She's like, what is this? They suspended the attorney for a long time.
Wow.
And they publicly, like, they made it a big thing. And that was the first foray of AI into the legal world that
Wow.
most attorneys had heard of. And ever since that moment in time, it's been a very hot topic. And you know how it goes, a few bad apples,
Right.
ruin the bunch. So not most attorneys are not that dumb to just use it without reading it or reviewing it. But I can tell you it is absolutely a crucial tool in what we do. I haven't had people like tell me they drafted documents and had me review them on ChatGPT, but I talk about it with my clients all the time. And I mean, it's just progressing so fast that if we have this conversation in 6 months from now, we're going to be having a different conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I mean, this is like we leverage ChatGPT a lot in our company for like writing emails, writing like content just as a starting point. And I do it in my like personal stuff also. But yeah, it's very interesting. And I'm always curious kind of how it's going to impact, I mean, investors, especially like investors that are starting out, they like to always like not spend money on services, something that's not going to generate revenue for them right now. I don't see them spending money on that. So they always like to like cut corners. And I feel like ChatGPT is one way where you have to be super extra careful that you don't have something that is prepared by ChatGPT. I can't even believe that attorney did that or just run into a situation like that where you use it as a legal agreement and it's completely null and void because it was just not the correct legal agreement.
Yeah, and so I have another business as well, and it's real estate related, doing investment stuff. And we launched this week our AI callers. So the AI consultants that I was talking about, this has been in the works for 3, 4 weeks now, where we've been kind of fine tuning them and testing them out, and we released them this week. And it looks like they're going to be successful. We modeled them off of other AI callers that we had seen that were in some markets more successful than human beings calling, a higher success rate in terms of setting appointments and things. And twice as effective actually in some markets. So, the opportunities are limitless. The other thing that I would say is underwriting. I mean, all these like technical numbers, anything with a skill set that's doesn't really require a human brain, it's just functions. Like, you can underwrite a deal now, and I don't know how long. I mean, you have to train your bot, your GPT, whatever, but you can train it to underwrite in 10 seconds or 30 seconds what used to
Right.
take 2 hours for someone trained to do. Someone trained at a high level with a degree and years of experience. I mean, just think about how powerful that is. So this whole generation coming up, part of it is they're going to become dumber and they're going to lose some skills, but part
Right.
of it is they're going to become more efficient because they're going to have prompt engineering. They're going to know how to
Right.
leverage these tools in a way better than anyone before them ever was able to. So it's a give and a take.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting time that we're living in. Like just the things that you can leverage chat GPT for, it's absolutely incredible. But when it comes to like legal stuff, like working with an attorney, accountant, like that's a whole different ball game. But you want to make sure you have the best people that you're working with. Bishoy, this has been absolutely incredible. I have final three questions to ask you. I clearly see you're a huge sports fan. What do you do for fun?
I like to travel. I got married last year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. And so it's been an awesome year and some change. It gives life more fulfillment, more meaning, more purpose. And so I had been a big traveler before, and then I got caught up in work, and I had gone like 5 years without doing it. A really cool trip, a little bit before COVID, and then ever since we've been married, we've been to like 5 different continents.
Oh, wow.
And so it's been awesome to kind of have that back in my life. I love playing sports. I love going to sports events. So those are kind of the things that keep me busy.
Yeah. What's the most fun place you've been to recently?
Oh,
Remarkable.
recently we did our summer trip to I would say the coolest place I ever been. My favorite place was New Zealand, and that's a little bit
Museum.
different. Yeah, I think that one's a little bit different. I was gonna say Europe, but Europe is awesome. Switzerland was amazing. But I'll tell you, if you ever can get to go to that coast of that side of the world, New Zealand was spectacular. I would highly, highly recommend. I liked it more than Australia, actually, which surprised me, but I
Right.
highly, highly recommend New Zealand.
So you've been to five continents. You have not been to two, but you've been to all other five of the seven continents. So Antarctica, and what's the other one that you haven't been to? Asia?
No, I've been to six, I guess. I've
Six.
been to
Okay.
six. I've just been to five. I
Oh,
went to
okay.
New
Last
Zealand
year.
like six.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I went to
Okay.
New Zealand like
Nice.
6 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
we did a honeymoon in South Africa. We did we've been to South America a few times. Went to Brazil, obviously a USA. We went to Thailand for Christmas, and then
Nice.
we did Europe last summer. So we've hit a bunch of cool. I've been very
Cool.
lucky.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. No, that's great. All right, what's the one book that's had the biggest impact on your life? It could be a business book, personal book, or one of each.
Oh, I love that question. I am reading a book now called Buy Back Your Time, which is really
Oh,
good.
Dan Martell.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. That's a really good one. How to Win Friends and Influence People changed my life, Dale Carnegie. And then I will also say Grit by Angela Duckworth. And that book fired me up. I'm a
Yeah.
gritty person as it is, but that book just fired me up. I that definitely made me just kind of work even
Right.
harder. So those are probably 3 books I'd give.
Yeah. All right. Final question. If you could meet any person, dead or alive, who would you want to meet and what question would you want to ask them?
I mean, I could say Jesus. That would be a pretty easy answer. But if I didn't go that route, I'd want to meet Eminem. I'm a big Eminem fan.
What would you want to ask him?
I've been thinking about that question for like 20 years now. I was like, what would I say if I saw him? I still haven't come up with a good answer.
All right.
I'd probably just ask him if he could put me on a song. How about
There you go.
that?
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Shai, this has been absolutely incredible. Someone listening to this wants to connect with you, learn more about your journey. What's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. So I'm all over social media nowadays. Attorney Bishoy is the handle. Attorney Bishoy, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can find me on LinkedIn, Bishoy M. Habib. And my law firm's name is Levacy Legal, Lev like Victor, ACY legal.com. Levacy Legal means leave a legacy because that's what I want to help my clients do. And so levacylegal.com.
Perfect. Awesome. We'll put links to all of that in the show notes. Shai, thank you so much. This was absolutely incredible and very, very informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharad. It's a pleasure, man.
Thanks.